let's say you're struggling, with emotional regulation. I actually really want to look at, are you eating enough carbs? And depending on what your socioeconomic status is, what your capacity for cooking is, because a lot of people have trauma or barriers around cooking. I'd rather you eat the carbs, however you're going to get those carbs, than focus on what the healthiest carb is. If you are so anxious that you feel like you're going to vomit every time that you eat, I just want you to eat calories. We can figure out nutrition later, but your brain and your nervous system needs fuel to function. So let's start there.
Welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. This is a show presented by Heart and Solutions Counseling Agency. We release new episodes every Sunday at 5 p.m. Central and encourage you to batch up that laundry, put away the dishes, plan for the week ahead, or do any other task that might seem daunting while you give our show a listen. You might just be encouraged to call your therapist, connect with this week's guest, or seek out those services you've been considering for a while but haven't made the commitment to yet. If you are in the state of Iowa and are in need of mental or behavioral health counseling, give us a call at 1-800-531-4236. Enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. My name is Dr. Julie Johnson. I'm the president and founder here at Heart and Solutions, mental health counseling and behavioral health counseling here in Iowa.
And I'm Chrissa Hunt. I am our vice president in charge of the behavioral health department. And this is our podcast, You Need a Counselor. So we are designed for people curious about counseling, but have barriers keeping them from experiencing the benefits of counseling. Our mission is to share stories about counseling, good, bad, and indifferent, and spread the message that everyone can benefit from mental health and behavioral health counseling services.
Our guest today is a 3-time returning guest. We've got Jayden Aubryn here with us today. Jayden is the founder of Ties Consulting and Therapy. Jayden specializes in holistically healing trauma by integrating mental, physical, sexual, and spiritual health. They use their identities as a Black, queer, non-binary psychotherapist, personal trainer, and consultant to help people in a holistic manner that involves mind, body, and everything else. So welcome, Jayden. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. This is always a pleasure.
We love having you here. It is so fun. And for those listening, there are 2 trainings as well that Jayden has put on for our sister company, You Need a Training. And that is geared towards mental health counselors, mental health professionals, but it's free to listen to even if you don't need the continuing education credit. So we'll link those and check those out as well. So what's been new for you, Jayden? What have you been up to?
Oh, always so much. So I've been building courses, so that's been fun. So I have a Working for Trauma course. I have a Surviving to Thriving, Managing Anxiety course. I'm working on a Cultivating Joy and Overcoming Depression course right now. I've also expanded out into a group practice. So I have a couple employees and I am doing supervision. And I've also been doing a lot more in the holistic health realm. So I got a couple extra certifications as I do. And now I'm doing holistic life audits as well, where I kind of help people look at their whole life. And we can look up to 8 domains, as little as 4, as many as 8 domains of your life, and start to make small changes over 3, 6, or 9 months to try and help you live a more holistic life and make reasonable, actionable changes instead of just trying to change your whole life at once.
Wow. Yeah, you've been busy. I'm curious about the life audits that you just mentioned. And you said there's you can change from 4 to 8 domains. What is a domain? And can you tell us what the 8 potential domains are that people could change?
Yeah, absolutely. So the 4 basic ones are sleep, breath, food, and movement. And then the other 4 optional ones are your relationship to yourself, your social life, sexual health, and spiritual exploration. Oh, and just, I guess, a little bit more about that. So I have been doing a lot of research around food, movement, breath, and how that, interacts on such a physiological levels, and then of course in all the different realms of our life. Even if you feel like you can't breathe well, that might impact your ability to feel confident in your body or to go out and make friends, right? And so while we know breathing is good, while we know eating healthy is good, like how do we actually start to make tangible, actionable changes? And a lot of people don't have time, they don't have capacity. So then they're going down these holistic health rabbit holes, and they're like, oh my God, I need to throw everything out of my kitchen. I need to go to the gym 5 days a week, and I need to start an hour-long breath practice. And like, who's going to actually do that? And then they feel bad and that they're a failure. So the idea of this holistic life audit is to be able to do things over a period of time, right? And I'm talking, 30 seconds to 5 minutes a day of additions that start to look at what are your life goals or your health goals? What do you want to be able to do? And then using whatever domains that you're interested in working with to help you reach those goals.
Yeah, and I breathing is something that I think that there is such a challenge there, right? It's like food we have to eat, and movement, okay, that sometimes feels like such a challenge, but breathing is something that doesn't seem like it's going to be very hard. But then when we go, oh, but I have to intentionally breathe, like then it feels like it's like, wait, whoa, that's way too much, because it's something we don't really think about making choices about very often. And so the idea of doing that, and I think sometimes people feel like, oh, what am I going to do during that time? So I love that 30 seconds, that 5 minutes, just adding that into our routine or building that onto another habit that we have can really make that feel a lot less overwhelming. Breath is, gosh, so important. When you talk about the breathing sense, I had a nasal passage opening surgery a few years ago, and I started sleeping with CPAP 6 years ago. I didn't realize I wasn't getting oxygen. I didn't understand that my body was not getting oxygen at night. I wasn't breathing. And so those things are so important. And doing an audit, intentionally looking at all of those different domains, it sounds like a wonderful, wonderful thing. So when somebody signs up to do this, how are we identifying our challenges in those different domains? If we pick the 8 domains, how are we identifying those challenges?
Yeah, so the first thing is everyone gets a 30-minute consultation. So whether you decide to move forward or not, like you get that 30-minute consultation. And that's where we start to talk about, what your goals are, generally speaking. And then if you want to move forward, I have you fill out a couple of forms. And my job is to figure out how anything in that domain can be tweaked to fit your goals, right? And I think that's the fun, creative part to me. I'm like, okay, so someone has sleep apnea. How can we address breath in the daytime to improve sleep apnea? How can we address food in the daytime, right, to address sleep apnea? How can we address social stuff, right, to then help address your sleep apnea? And for me, that this is fun. I'm like, oh, this is so creative. I got spreadsheets. I got a little like it's just like a puzzle. I have a great time, but I think the power of this is starting to realize that we can use any one of these domains to make changes. I think with social media right now and the way marketing and the algorithm is set up, is so much of, do this hip exercise to release trauma, take creatine to improve focus, like do this for that. And while those are tools, it's presented as if it's like a fix or the only solution, especially in the movement sphere. I see all this time, stop doing oblique side bends, stop doing calf raises, like do these other things. And really, it's about why are you doing those things? For breath, this is a huge thing, right? There's so many different ways to breathe. So actually knowing which technique you are trying to do for which purpose and which goal is so important. And that's a lot of information, right? That's expert level knowledge that most people are not going to know. And if they try to figure it out, they have to have a lot of media literacy and a lot of time and spend a lot of energy to like sort through all the bull and actually figure out what's going to be helpful to them. So that's kind of my job, is to kind of cut through all of that and say, okay, here are the things that I think are going to be helpful. And then before I finalize the plan, we hop on a call together and I'm like, this is my thought. This is like the order I think we should maybe do things. Is there anything in here that's not going to work, or anything in here that you can already feel in your body is going to be a barrier? Like, sounds great, but you're not going to do it. And then we go ahead and problem solve and figure out like, okay, what's going to be the more helpful thing then.
That's nice that you go through like, okay, how realistic are these things that you write up? Because it could be like, oh yeah, cool, I'm not going to do any of that. So that is probably helpful to go through too. How long though is somebody typically a client? And I know you mentioned too, like it's like a 30-second adjustment here or 5 minutes there. Like, do you do one thing at a time, one of the domains at a time, or how does it work then to like reach whatever goal they're trying to go to?
Yeah, so it's really individualized. I want to start with the thing that they're most likely to do, most excited to do, and is going to have the most tangible benefits first, right? Because they're hooked. They're like, oh my gosh, I've been only doing this for a week or two, and now it's already working. And now we have that dopamine and that internal motivation to keep going. So if someone is really excited about movement, like I just did one of these plans, and this person is really getting into kettlebell exercises. And so I will program some kettlebell exercises for them that can help improve their goals of focus, cognitive function, sleep, and also improving their sex life, and having enough energy for sex. So that's what I started with, because they're already doing some version of kettlebell. We just need to like add in some specific exercises. And then, midway through, when they're like, oh yeah, this feels good, I can feel a change, then I start doing the things where they're like, oh, okay, well, I know I want to do this, but am I really going to journal midday? I don't know. Oh, but you happen to exercise midday. So now that we're used to you feeling good about doing your kettlebell exercises in the middle of the day, after you do that, we're going to do some breath work to calm down, and then you're going to journal. You're going to have your midday reflection, right? So it's paired with things that they already like. So this is kind of like how I determine that progression, but it's really individualized to every person.
Yeah, and I love that it is so holistic, because you're a trained personal trainer. So you're able to bring that part of it. And, motivationally speaking, doing kettlebell sounds terrible. But if we're tapping into motivation, right? No, like this exercise is going to give you stamina for sex. That's a great motivation, right? So when we're tapping into that and saying, no, this is why we're doing it. This is affects your sexual health, your relational health. It affects all of these other pieces. That definitely gives us a better chance of succeeding and feeling like that's more realistic, and that we want to do that in the middle of the day. Well, that's wonderful. Yeah, excellent. And then you do a lot of work with sexual health. And can you tell us more about how you're able to integrate that in? I know as a personal trainer, you've got that physical health part really covered, and you've got a lot of training in sexual health. So can you tell us more about how you integrate that into the other elements?
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, well, there's so many components to sexual health. One, like, what are your goals with that? Some people feel like they have too low of a libido, too high of a libido. They really enjoy sex, but they struggle with orgasms. They can have sex with other people, but they can't masturbate, or vice versa. There's a lot of people-pleasing tendencies that can come up during sex. There might be people who are interested in more power dynamics or BDSM. A lot of people who have ADHD or trauma might get sensory overwhelmed or distracted during sex, and then they feel bad, right? So there's so much about sex that is emotional and mental. And yes, of course, if you have more stamina, more mobility, more strength, you can probably do some more fun stuff in the bedroom. But a lot of it is also about, do you feel good in your body? Do you feel good and confident relating to other people? Do you feel like if you are getting distracted, can you manage that non-judgmentally and then advocate for what you need to help focus in with your partner so that you can have the experience that you want? Is it some acceptance that it's okay to have the libido be a bit lower or be a bit higher? You know, a lot of people have judgment around what level their libido is. I always ask, are you satisfied with your libido? Right? Not like, is it high or low? Right? Are you satisfied with it? You get way more information with that. And so I think from there, it's much easier to ascertain more clinically oriented goals as we might think of it as we're working on sense of self, we're working on confidence, we're working on boundaries just within the sexual realm. And then from there is quite easy to um, come up with like a treatment plan.
And you have a few trainings as well about like sexual health. Like there's one on your website about BDSM for healing in relationships, and it talks about how it can be healing for trauma in relationships. And I'm curious about that. Can you kind of explain how BDSM might be helpful for people with trauma? Because I feel like when you think about it, you think the opposite. So I'm curious about that training.
Yeah. So I love talking about this. I don't know what my I just got very blurry. There we go. So with trauma, right? There's a lot of harm relationally, and there's a lot of harm around power and control, right? A lot of times people feel like they didn't have power, agency, autonomy in a particular situation, that they weren't able to, escape or get themselves to safety. So BDSM is all about power and control, right? like the power and control piece is what distinguishes BDSM from kink generally, right? Kink is anything that's non-normative, which is always fun to try and define. But BDSM is power exchanges. There's a dom and a sub, a top and a bottom. And so with trauma, whenever we're healing trauma, we are working with old traumatic energy and creating new experiences and new relationships with that, right? Whether that's EMDR and we're bringing up those bodily sensations, allowing them to move through, whether it's more gestalt, where we're like having those conversations with the empty chair to try and say the things we couldn't say before. Same thing with BDSM, right? It's being in a position of not having power and being able to create a new experience with that, or maybe reclaim power, or maybe submit to that lack of agency and just be like, you know what, the pleasure can be experienced here. This doesn't have to be harmful. And along the way, to be able to do these things, you develop a lot of skills that are really important for trauma healing. You have to have body awareness, right? We're going to make sure you're not dissociating. If you are on the receiving end of impact play, getting hit with a paddle, it would be really dangerous if you dissociate and then the person hitting you doesn't know that you're not present and that they're going too hard, right? So that person needs to be able to read your cues, but you also get to learn how to stay present under distress and actively communicate your needs. So you're setting boundaries, you're advocating for yourself, you're being mindful, you're building distress tolerance, you get to negotiate. And so negotiating is a big piece of BDSM. So this is what I want, this is what I don't want. Here's what aftercare looks like, and learning how to care for yourself after something really intense has happened. And do you want individual alone time care or partnered care? There's so many amazing tools that you learn along the way. And so that's why I say it also helps a lot with relationships too, because now you're learning interpersonal strategies that help with friendships, co-workers, partners, all of the above.
Wonderful. And these are things that I think uh, generally for counselors, uh, I think that it's difficult sometimes for counselors to bring up sexual health and to incorporate that into the clinical goals. And so I just think these are such great examples of these are the skills that we're learning when we're doing a nutrition plan or when we're doing a personal training plan. These are the same skills that we're building, and we're doing that then in our sexual life. And so I think that that's such a great example of how it does tie together and how we bring those in to that clinical setting. Uh, yeah, and you talked a little bit about that healing that of that trauma. And can you talk a little bit more about how you integrate that part into the spiritual side of things? We've talked about the physical and the breath and the sexual side of things. Can you talk about how you integrate that into the spiritual side?
Yeah, absolutely. And just before I do, just a quick like side note slash tangent of I think this is why a holistic integrative health is so important, right? Because so many, as a therapist, when we go to school, there's like we're talking about thoughts and feelings. Anything else, refer out to a specialist. And that's such a disservice to us as therapists and also a disservice to our clients because they are all connected, and if we can't see the whole body and do holistic health, then we can't actually serve the whole person. And it's frustrating when we feel limited and you're just like, oh, I don't know what to do, and there's no specialist, anyways. So I love that you're asking these questions about how it all relates. So with spiritual health, I really think about this as a connection to something greater than ourselves. And so, of course, this could be a deity, it could be nature, energy, anything like that, but also it can be community. It can be your pets, right? It's really anything that's bigger than you. And I think there are a lot of spiritual, existential topics that that come up when we're talking about grief, when we're talking about death, when we're talking about life transitions, right? All of these things tend to be the more existential spiritual realm, but we don't frame it like that, which is, I think, a disservice because how are we going to create some evidence-based, like cognitive 8-step like pathway of dealing with death, right? What everyone has a different relationship to death, and our how we grew up around it, talking about it, our experiences with it, our beliefs about the afterlife and what happens to us when we die. All of these are so incredibly important to be having those conversations. And even outside of death, just grief in general, we are grieving constantly. We're constantly losing stages of life, friendships, jobs, social media followers, like whatever is causing you to grieve, like even if it's this micro grief. And so when we are thinking about, these topics and how do we connect to something larger than us? So many people feel lonely and isolated right now. How do you connect to something that's greater than yourself? That's spiritual health. And so obviously, I absolutely will talk about deities and like meet people where they're at with whatever like religious or spiritual beliefs that they have. But I think spiritual health is so much more than that. It really is that connection piece. And I think when we tie spirituality to religion, because there's so much harm that has that goes with that, right? We actually again do a disservice because then we can't attend to our clients' spiritual health and we can't help them learn what connection and devotion and faith means outside of a religious concept. And these are really important topics and frameworks when we're just talking about being in community and feeling connected and content with life.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious too. I mean, we may have talked about this in one of our older episodes, but you talked about like in grad school how you're told like if it's not about your feelings or thoughts, then like refer out. Like, how did you become more of a holistic therapist and want to be able to like serve all parts of a person? And was that difficult, like in this field, to become like certified in all of those different ways to practice like holistic health and not just focusing on thoughts and feelings?
Yeah. I think the way my brain works is very systems oriented. So I am not actually a details person. All my details are in spreadsheets somewhere, right? But I'm really interested in how things connect and relate. And I want to figure out how, Egypt in 800 BC influenced the politics in South America 1500 years later. Like that's the type of stuff I'm like, oh, this is so cool, connection. So I think that, going through school and learning all these topics, I kind of had this tendency to say, oh, these things are related. I can see how this is connected. Like, for example, like anxiety and OCD. People would treat those things so completely separately. And while there are differences, right, to be aware of, when we actually look at what's happening in the nervous system and we look at what's happening in the brain, we actually see a lot of similarities. And so let's start at the similar like points and then I kind of like flow chart my way through based on the specific symptoms. And I think because I'm like, okay, what are the similarities? That often brought me back to the body. I needed to learn about the nervous system. I needed to learn about the brain, the endocrine system. Like these are kind of like the base components that start to interact and affect all the symptoms that we see later. And I think as a dancer and as a creative and artist, I was already like engaging with these things and expressing them in like my personal life. So then I was like, oh my gosh, I'm nerding out about this in my professional life. I get to experience it in my personal life. And, from there, it's just a self-fulfilling special interest rabbit hole, fun time.
What were some other surprising connections that you kind of came across in your research? What are some other things that, whether it's diagnoses that might have connection with uh, any of these 8 domains, or was there anything else surprising that you've kind of come across in your research?
Hmm. I think the most surprising and probably was also really influential for me as early in my career, I worked with a lot of people who experienced psychosis. And in my graduate program, I remember specifically like the day I can visualize the classroom where we are learning about the DSM, we're learning how to diagnose, and we get to the psychotic disorders, and our teacher's like, yeah, this is like the diagnostic criteria, but you're probably never going to, work with anyone who experiences psychosis. And if you do, you'll just refer them to a specialist. That was it. That was my training on psychosis. And then I left grad school and I started working at a crisis center where like maybe like 50% of people were experiencing psychosis at any given point in time. So I was like, oh boy, I need more training. And luckily, I, had the opportunity to get trained by people who themselves hear voices and experience like elated moods and all these types of things that clinically speaking, I will continue to use the word psychosis, but that's actually, it's really not the best. That's not the terms that they would use. Usually hearing voices is the best, a broad umbrella term and non-consensus reality. So learning from them, I started to see how similar their experience was to pretty much everyone else I was working with, right? Like when I actually heard it from their voice, I was like, oh, delusions. That's really not that different from anxiety, right? The line from severe anxiety into delusions or paranoia, right? It's a spectrum when we actually think about it. And I can see where they are on this spectrum. Okay, we can talk about voices, but then I'm also over here learning about internal family systems and parts work, which is kind of like a version of that. You're not auditorially hearing it necessarily. So I think there's a lot of things with psychosis that really heighten our experience, right? Either a heightened version of our normal experience, but if we actually take a step back and look at it as a spectrum, I was like, wow, they are so much more similar to us than I thought. And a lot of the skills that I learned in working with people who hear voices and experience non-consistent reality, those have been some of the best coping skills that I've been able to use for anxiety, for bipolar, for depression, for ADHD. It's kind of like if you meet the most marginalized like populations and start there, everyone benefits. That's definitely true for psychosis. And I learned that psychosis does not need to be a death sentence. One of the big issues for that population is just lack of awareness and lack of community support. People do not know how to respond to someone who is participating in non-consensus reality. And that is often the most damaging component, not their actual symptoms.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really beneficial. Like you said, that you were able to take a training by people who have experienced or are currently experiencing like hearing voices and things like that. Because like you said, I'm sure a lot of the population has no idea. And like even in grad school, you were told like, oh, just refer out if that happens, or you're never going to see anyone with that diagnosis. So that is good that you were able to find a training like that. I know you mentioned you have some other certifications in holistic health since we've talked last. Can you kind of explain what else you've been certified in recently?
Oh yeah, I don't remember what I had last time, so I'll list them all out. So I, certified personal trainer, certified in trauma-informed weightlifting, certified sex therapy informed professional, and certified mental health and clinical nutrition specialist. I think those are all the ones that are holistic health specific.
And you said it was, what was the nutrition one? Nutrition for mental health?
Yeah, it was like certified mental health clinical nutrition specialist.
Wow. So tell us about that. What that's
Oh
wonderful.
man.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, oh gosh. Like when I was taking this training, literally every single day, I just be taking the training and then I go to my partner, I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to tell you this really fun fact about like food and nutrition and mental health. It really just completely changed how I saw so much. I now offer a training on healing trauma with food and nutrition that is largely based off of that. And oh, also have a certification in integrated mental health. Psh, forgot about that one, but I think I had that when I talked with you last time. But yes, this food and our nutrition and mental health, we got to really deep dive in how food and nutrition affects the nervous system. So, oh gosh, we're down to a core thing that's going on, how it affects the nervous system, how it affects the brain. We're talking, the actual neurotransmitters. I got to learn so much about blood sugar and how blood sugar impacts a lot of mental health symptoms and diagnoses and the physical health. And a lot of times, people not eating in the morning, just going straight to coffee, or waking up in the middle of the night and feeling anxious and not falling back asleep, or feeling like they don't have emotional capacity or willpower. That's all related to blood sugar, right? Like blood glucose is directly related to willpower. So people are like, oh no, I'm so lazy and I can't do anything. I'm like, eat a cookie and then see if you want to do the thing. Oh, you do want to do the thing afterwards? It's not that you're lazy. You literally needed a cookie. And whenever I can tell someone to eat a cookie, like it's a great day for both parties. But yeah, so I got to learn about that. And yeah, definitely a lot more about the brain, and kind of like, inhibitory transmitters. Okay, I won't get too much into the like super nerdy technological stuff, but we deep dive, and it's been really nice because I feel like in the past I've skimmed the surface of that. Like usually when we're taking trainings as clinicians, it's like, here's how you use this practically. But I was very excited to actually take this training and learn the nitty gritty details of it, because I feel like that allows for more flexibility and creativity when I understand why these things work and what to assess for.
Yeah, can you give us examples then of maybe, I know you talked about like waking up and not eating and that affecting your blood sugar, but like eating healthy foods versus non-healthy foods, like does that affect mental health as well? Like obviously we hear all the time like eating whole foods and eating nutritious meals. Does that really like affect mental health?
Uh, oh man, it's a big topic. So I want to be clear that the way you need to eat for, your mental health goals might be different than the way you want to eat for other goals, specifically weight loss. A lot of the things I'm going to tell you to do to eat for your mental health is not going to help you lose weight. And I think that's a whole can of worms right there. But when we're looking at mental health goals, oftentimes we're looking at the ability to concentrate, the ability to emotionally regulate, the ability to sleep, socially engage, it's that type of stuff. And a lot of times we need more food for that. And so eating healthy, quote unquote, like, mm, yeah, pretty much we know like trans fats are not great for you, and you don't want to binge and you want a varied diet, but like, let's get more specific and realistic. I think that the idea of eating healthy and health foods is just not helpful when we're actually trying to meet clinical goals. So let's say you're struggling, with emotional regulation. I actually really want to look at, are you eating enough carbs? And depending on what your socioeconomic status is, what your capacity for cooking is, because a lot of people have trauma or barriers around cooking. I'd rather you eat the carbs, however you're going to get those carbs, than focus on what the healthiest carb is. If you are so anxious that you feel like you're going to vomit every time that you eat, I just want you to eat calories. We can figure out nutrition later, but your brain and your nervous system needs fuel to function. So let's start there. And then if obviously I'm not going to recommend things that are like a pipeline to diabetes and hypertension. No, but like that's not the main focus all the time, right? Sometimes the main focus is survival. And then we can focus on a thriving diet. And that can be more of those healthy foods. For a long time, I struggled with eating enough fiber myself because I have ADHD. And so I wouldn't buy fruits and vegetables because they would just spoil in my fridge because I wasn't always looking at it, or I didn't always have the capacity to cook. And I was living in Seattle, and Seattle's expensive, and I did not have money to just be wasting on food, fruits and vegetables that are going to spoil. So you know where I got my fiber from? Popcorn, right? Now, is popcorn the best, the healthiest, quote unquote, food for fiber? No. There's a lot of salt, there's trans fats in them, whatever. But did I have more regular stools when I ate popcorn a few times a week? Yeah. And that I was constipated, and so that's what I was trying to do. I had popcorn and then olives, and then my doctor was like, "Oh my God, the salt intake. Okay, let me just drink more water." It's easier for me to drink more water than it is for me to go to a store that I don't want to go to and then cook foods that I don't feel like cooking with money I don't have. So healthy versus unhealthy, I just think it misses the point, right? What are your goals and how can we meet them? And then how can we allow for your goals to shift and evolve over time?
I love that. It kind of takes a similar approach to, eating when parents are trying to get their children to have nutrition, right? And to have food in their stomachs. And sometimes that is exactly where you need to start. It's not, okay, these are your carrots, and if you don't eat your carrots, you can't leave the table. It's okay. We need you to eat food, right? Like we need something to be in your stomach. And starting there, for parenting, is the place to start. And so I love that because like we are able to do that for ourselves too. When we're caretaking somebody else, we do these things, we can do that for ourselves as well. And we can say, yeah, we just need to get food in the stomach. We just need to get something, some sort of fiber. We need to get some sort of carbs in there. And then once we've met that need and we've got that system taken care of, now we can fine tune it. Now we can make adjustments over time. So I just think that's really, really beautiful. And uh, it's kind of like when we talk about whenever I watch YouTube, I see all these commercials for medications. And it's, it's like, hey, do you have this? You could take this medication. And then they read the side effects. And it's like, wait a minute, that's worse, right? Like it's worse to get those side effects than to have the thing that you're taking the medication for. And so I always think, gosh, it's such a balancing act, right? Of, okay, I've got high cholesterol. And so, my doctor recommends this prescription, but then that has liver impacts, right? And so then and so all of these things, it's like balancing that out. And food is the same way. Food is that balancing act because yes, we need it, and we need it for multiple different reasons. And so our body needs it, but our brains need it, and for our mental wellness, we need it. And so
Absolutely. Food should be pleasurable,
yeah, yeah,
and if you're so stressed about eating the right foods or whatever the latest Instagram trend is or what's healthy nowadays, knowing that like that changes every decade or so anyways, like some of those like really specific things, it really takes the enjoyment out of it. I rather ask, how do we make pizza healthy for you? How do we make burgers healthy for you? How do we make nachos healthy for you? And there's so many things that we can do with like the order that you eat your food, the toppings that you add, the drinks that you have with it. If someone like is really struggling with sleeping through the night because of like maybe their blood sugar is dropping and then it's causing adrenaline to release in the middle of the night and it's waking them up, I actually want them to eat maybe a little bit later at night to help sustain them, or I want them to eat their fiber first so that way, that will help sustain the blood sugar throughout the night. But in that person, maybe a burger is not the best super late at night because it's so heavy on digestion. But maybe something like ramen or a pizza might actually be a bit better. So as long as there's like a good mix of veggies and meat on this pizza, right? Like that actually might sustain you later through the night, or ice cream with nuts in it, right? This is slept on as a thing to help you sleep through the night. But have a little snack, just a bit of ice cream, some nuts. You got fats, you got protein, and you got the sugar, and it can help you actually sleep through the night. So a lot of times people say, oh, that's fast food or it's unhealthy or whatever. But, again, depending on your mental health, quote unquote, goals, I think it's just a different question to be asking. And I know I'm like saying this so passionately. I just care so much about this because I feel like so many people feel like they're failing with how they're eating and that they're just never going to get it right. And yeah, everything they do is wrong and they're going to die some hypertensive diabetic death. And it's like, okay, first off, we don't need to demonize these diseases. Like you can manage them and they're not like lifelong all the time. Like we can reverse them if we get there. And like let's focus on what's super important right now, and that's having a healthy relationship with food, having pleasure with food, and making sure that your nervous system and your brain are not completely crashing out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's beneficial too, because like you said, this advice isn't always for losing weight, but physical health and mental health are not the same thing. So that is interesting, the difference. Okay, I wanted to hear about your Twerk for Trauma release training. I know we mentioned that before we started recording. I just think it just sounds fun. So I think people might benefit from it. So can we hear about what the training's about and what to expect from that training?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's been a lot of hullabaloo lately around twerking for trauma, moving your hips to release trauma. But, as a Black dancer who grew up twerking, what I see people trying to do is not twerking. It's not some Tina Belcher, I don't know. It's hip movement, but twerking is a very specific thing. And, I don't need to only be judgy about it. I'm a slightly judgy, person, just a little bit, because I'm human. But I think what's more important than it is to help. If you want to twerk, let me teach you how to do it. Because look, no one taught me how to twerk. I embarrassed myself at my 6th grade dance And, I went to school with all Black people. So like, I had to figure it out. So seventh grade, I was prepared, a lot of practice in my bedroom mirror. Um, so, sometimes we just need that guidance without the shame that I experienced. Hold your hand up, like, what is working? How do you have fun? And, in this course, not only do I teach you how to twerk, but I also teach you how some like basic dance fundamentals. So a lot of people feel like, oh, I can't go to the club and just dance. And I'm like, okay, let's learn how to do that. And then we also build the strength and mobility that's needed for twerking, because it is a workout. You will be sweating. And then we also work on actually releasing the trauma from your body, a lot of hip, like release, a lot of slowing down. Because not everything's about work, 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 right, to meet your goals, right? That's not how we're going to release trauma. It's actually about being still and building that in. So those are all of the components of it. And yeah, I think it's really important. I have like a lot of modifications for people of all body sizes. My body size fluctuates. And so like at the time of the recording, I actually am in a larger body size, which I think is like really great because you know what, you can still dance and you can still be strong and mobile in different body sizes. I have modifications for people who need that, like maybe if you want to work on dropping it low, but your knees aren't there yet, right? You can use a chair to like kind of help assist or a wall or anything like that. And it's about having fun and finding your own voice. And I think these are really important aspects of trauma healing that we don't always talk about. It's not just about releasing the traumatic energy, it's also about having a voice, knowing who you are, feeling good in your body, right? That mindful embodiment piece. And then, gold star standard is if you can take those components and apply them with other people, right? So if you can go and twerk at the cookout, twerk at the club, or even just feel like feel comfortable dancing and doing a little two-step, right? And doing the electric slide and getting a bit low with it, having that strength and that confidence in your body to engage with people socially, I think is so important. So yeah, it's twerking for trauma because it's very catchy, but I think there's a lot of components there that really aid to trauma healing.
When I think about twerking, right, I can very vividly picture like Miley Cyrus. That was like the first twerking. It just came into that was the first time I ever heard the word. And so tell us a little bit, what makes twerking versus shaking, right? Or anything.
Okay, so first off, like Miley Cyrus is forever on my shit list for one, whatever she attempted. And then two, when
Twerking.
people say, oh, Miley Cyrus invented twerking, she didn't like say she did it. Oh my, like, okay, we don't have that much time, so I won't rant about it, but I have gotten into full feuds. My very first argument over like my one of my first girlfriends was like my ex, her friend said that Miley Cyrus invented twerking, and I like lost my shit. And then I got mad at my partner for not defending me. Both of these people were not Black, obviously. So, to Miley Cyrus. But yeah, okay, so twerking is it has its roots in Africa, in the African diaspora, right? So if we look at African dance, it's a lot of movements. There are like some specific, I won't get too technical, there are a few specific dance styles that were around in West Africa. And then during the slave trade, they came to the Caribbean, kind of involved, but they're all like low and like very focused on like hip isolation and hip movements. And then eventually those Caribbean folks came to Southern US and specifically New Orleans. And that dance style integrated with hip hop, right? So hip hop was originated by Black and Afro Latinos in New York City, right? And so hip hop is coming down from New York and twerking, or I would say that twerk-based African like dance movement influences coming up from the Caribbean. They're meeting in New Orleans, and that is where modern day twerking originated from. To like, I mean, I can't really describe what makes like, okay, first off, twerking is all in your legs, really. It's actually a freedom in the hips that allow the booty juice to jiggle, right? That's kind of the goal. So a lot of people, their first mistake is they start using their back. You know, you need a little bit of low back mobility to allow for that hip movement and that hip freedom, but it's really a leg workout. And again, if you look at African traditional dances, that makes a lot of sense. If you even look at hip hop, it's very low and down and bouncing, right? So that's kind of twerk movement. And so it was a very specific cultural context that twerking was invented and created and has expanded. Like side note, it's a different trajectory than perreo. A lot of people say perreo is just Spanish for twerking, and actually it's very different cultural origins. So I think that's part of like if you're going to do a cultural dance, learn a little bit about it, right? Like we all know salsa is Latin, right? And we all know that there's like some specific salsa movements. So having that with twerking too, I think it's really important.
That is wonderful. Absolutely. Yeah. Love that. Sorry, Chrissa, go ahead.
Like Julie should take twerk for trauma while I release class. She's learning twerking is.
We should take it together. That sounds so fun.
Practice twerking. Do it at a retreat next week. If you could give a suggestion to somebody listening to the episode who might be on the fence about starting counseling, what suggestion might you give them?
You know, you can always make counseling work for you. There's no right way to do counseling. I mean, you know, today we talked about so many, you know, food, spirituality, twerking, like all these things. I think sometimes people get this idea that counseling is just, I'm going to go sit on this couch and cry and talk about hard things. And that can be a part of it, maybe, if that's what you're working on and what you want to do. But there's so many other ways to engage in counseling. It can be full of laughter and fun and jokes, and that is completely fine. And if that is the counseling that you're looking for and you want, you can advocate for that. Because, you know, as a therapist, I love it when I have my clients who want to joke through, you know, things like, we'll get serious when we need to, but I don't want to be serious all day either, you know? And so it's actually really great when I have clients who are like, nah, let's keep it light, let's have some fun, let's do some movement together. So definitely feel free to advocate for that, but you can 100% make your therapy and your counseling work for you.
Thank you so much, Jayden, for being here again for the third time and for all of the work that you're doing over on You Need a Training too. It's just so great to hear just all these different aspects of your knowledge and your understanding of the connections between all these different pieces in our lives. It's just awesome. So we will link Jayden's courses in the show notes because there's 4 courses there on the site and they all look very, very useful and very, very fun. So thank you so much for being here.
Yes, of course. I am Jayden Aubryn and I need a counselor.
And I'm Chrissa Hunt.
And I'm Julie Johnson, and we need a counselor.
And so do you.
Thank you for listening to the You Need a Counselor podcast. We are so grateful that you're here. You can also find and connect with You Need a Counselor on Facebook and Instagram. If you've enjoyed today's show, please take a moment to like, review, or leave a comment, as all of these things help others to find and benefit from the podcast as well. If you're in the state of Iowa and interested in mental health counseling or behavioral health intervention services, give us a call at 800-531-4236